Did you spend thousands of dollars on your CFI? Were you too lazy to renew it? Has it been 20 years and now you wish you had it?
I'll never flight instruct again.
I never need that. I fly jets now. Well, if this is you or me.
And me.
And now you're trying to figure out how to get it back.
Your kids want to fly.
Seth Lake has come to the show to explain to two idiots that let it go how to get it back. Welcome aboard the 21.5 Professional Pilots Podcast.
Rock on. You're on 121.5, the emergency frequency.
It's a show by professional pilots for professional pilots.
I looked back at them and I said, I don't think we're at the right airport. And they go, I don't think we are either.
Each episode, we bring you fascinating conversations with industry experts.
I think I should be a go-to on how to deal with 63, 64-year-old men.
You're going to chase it like a dog chasing a school bus.
But we're not just about the serious stuff. We're here to have fun.
And I like to sit with pilots a lot of times. I always say they're better looking than Tom Cruise.
It's a whole thing.
The 21.5 Professional Pilots Podcast is your destination for everything aviation, whether you're cruising in the flight levels or just starting your journey. Max, we are so excited to be rejoined by our favorite DPE airline pilot, reservist pilot in the military. He does all the things. Seth Lake, welcome back to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me back.
Welcome
Glad
back,
to be here.
Seth. Gosh, what are we going to talk about today?
Max, do you have? I feel like you have something you need to share with the listeners.
Yeah, go ahead. Did you spend thousands of dollars on your CFI? Were you too lazy to renew it? Has it been 20 years and now you wish you had it?
I'll never flight instruct again.
I never need that. I fly jets now. Well, if this is you or me.
And me.
And now you're trying to figure out how to get it back.
Your kids want to fly.
Seth Lake has come to the show to explain to two idiots that let it go how to get it back.
Seth, we're in need. We made one of the biggest mistakes you can make as a professional pilot. We worked so hard to get our CFI, II, MEI, all the I's, AGI, IGI, everything, and we all let it lapse because we were hot shit jet pilots in our 20s.
In the regional level.
Yeah, never going to need that thing again. I'm so done with instructing, and now here we are, both wishing we had our CFIs again. And we need your help to figure out.
And the good news is, I don't think we're alone, because when we talked to Seth about doing this show, he goes, I get like 2 calls a week from airline pilots wondering what it takes to get their CFI back. So here we are.
Yeah. Well, you're definitely not alone. I mean, probably every airline trip I do, the captain at least expresses some interest in, like, well, I've been thinking about renewing my CFI, So yeah, it's very common, and it is, that was a great intro. It was very touching. I felt like there was going to be a call to action or something for you to donate to the cause or something.
Yeah, right.
You'd have to have somebody feeling sorry for you. That's the problem. That's what we don't have.
Yeah, I don't think anyone feels sorry for us.
The only people feeling sorry for us is ourselves. So
yeah.
Yeah.
So so just real quickly, I guess Dylan and I, pretty similar situation. Got all of our certificates, got our CFI. CFI instructing was our first jobs. I got CFI, II, and then the MEI too. I don't know. I think when I was instructing, but had all the I's, like he said. Instructed for a couple years, punched out, went to the regional level, and then never thought about my CFI again until many, many years later now. And so never even attempted to keep it current. I don't think I ever renewed it even one time, which is pathetic. But is that the same as you, basically?
I think I renewed it once or twice through our boys with American Flyers.
Oh, maybe I did do the American Flyers one time. I think one time.
So, yeah. So we let it lapse, and now, of course, we have kids. We've got people in our lives that want to learn how to fly. We're getting back into GA, everything, and Seth is just rolling his eyes because it sounds like he hears us about once a week. So we wanted to have you back on, Seth, to kind of walk us through the process of getting it back. How do we prepare? What needs to happen? And then also as a cautionary tale to those that are younger, that are listening to this, that maybe still have their CFI, just remind folks how they can keep their CFI current and some of the ways that that you have designed a program, well, a guide, I would say, to help folks, CFIs, students, all sorts of people. We want to talk about that resource a little bit as well. So the floor is yours, Seth. Why don't you go ahead and get on your soapbox and tell Max and I what idiots we are?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, again, you're not alone. This happens all the time for a lot of the reasons you stated. We worked really hard as CFIs, and then as soon as you get into the professional flying world, you kind of let that lapse unless you get involved in maybe the training department of whatever carrier you're working for. Anyway, it's a little bit shorter to talk about the ways you can keep it current. So let's talk about that real quick, because there's been some recent changes in that, and we'll talk about those changes. But it's kind of related. Within the last 6 months, this has changed. So
Oh, wow.
overall, there's 6 ways for you to keep current. And the key timeline here is 24 calendar months. You probably remember that from when you got your initial CFI completed. Now, with the recent changes, the FAA has added actually a 3-month grace period. So once you hit 24 months, if you don't maintain currency, you have another 3 months where you can regain it by just attending a FERC. So that's obviously one of the ways that you can maintain currency, but the FAA kind of added a little bit of relief there. So just in case you forget, you can take the FERC and not have to do a reinstatement up to 3 months past your expiration. So that's a recent change. Another somewhat recent change is for the military aviators that are listening. I'll talk to them because that's how I started your show. Was I was a military guy first, listening to the show, kind of wondering what the 121 life was going to be like. So if you're a military instructor pilot or evaluator, and I think most of those, all evaluators are also instructors, but if you take a Form 8 check ride within the last 6 months, you can reinstate with that, even if you've gone past the 3 months. So, for military aviators, there are a separate option out there. But overall, the 6 ways to maintain currency are to pass a practical test. So, let's say you got your CFI initial and you want to add on your MEI, you can you take your MEI test and that rehacks your currency for another 24 months. You can endorse a certain pass rate. So you need 5 students endorsed for a practical test in the previous 24 months. So if you're an active instructor, you can renew based on your activity as an instructor. So that's way number 2. Number 3 is you can complete a FERC. So it sounds like y'all are both familiar with that. The one that I recommend everybody is you can just Google FERC for life. And I think there's American Flyers. You pay a one-time fee, you get access to their FERC for life. So just take that FERC, and every 24 months, that will rehack your currency. Way number 4 is the military proficiency check. So if you pass an instructor exam, a Form 8 check ride in the Air Force or military, Army, Air Force, Navy, whatever, that rehacks. The 5th is if you're an evaluator role. So this is kind of a somewhat new, but let's say you're a 121 captain, or even a 91K captain, or a Part 135 captain. And in your job description, your job is to evaluate the first officers that you're flying with. So you're involved in a regular evaluation of first officers. If you get that from your op spec or your flight manual, something with like your carrier's kind of letterhead official document saying that your duties as a captain is evaluating your first officer, then that you can actually use that to renew. So if you're a 121 captain, you could just renew based off of that in most carriers, because captains are generally, like I know at Southwest, it's in the job description that a captain's job is to evaluate the performance of a first officer. So they would be able to use that for their renewal. And then, so that's way number 5. Way number 6 is to actively instruct in the FAA Wings program. So the FAA Wings program is a pilot proficiency program. So you have to do a certain number of events for participants in the Wings program, and you can renew based off of that. So that you've got 6 ways there to stay current in that 24 calendar month period. And then with that added 3-month grace period for the FERC. So I just thought I'd get that out of the way first.
Yeah.
That's how to, keep from having to do the reinstatement, which is where y'all are at, because y'all didn't do any of those things. You let it expire like a lot of other people do. So now the only way to reinstate, if you're not in the military, is you have to take a new practical test, and it's called the reinstatement check ride.
Sorry, before we get there, I have 2 questions about the how to keep it current. There was always this like lore of when you would take your check ride that they could just like the examiner could like for a recurrent or even for a type rating or whatever, and they could always just like kind of renew your CFI too as a little like shrapnel benefit. Is that still the case, or was that a thing, or did I just make
Urban
that up?
legend?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sharing my screen right now. Y'all mentioned the guide. We're actually going to look at this real quick. So for those of y'all watching, I've got the ACE guide pulled up. And what the ACE guide is I've taken all of the FAA manuals, a lot of the advisory circulars, legal interpretations, all that, and put it into one document, made it easy to navigate. Because we're fixing to talk about, there's a lot of regulations that involve what we're talking about today. And so to make them easier to navigate, rather than opening up like 15 different windows in Chrome, go into the FAA website. They're just all on this guide. So a good place to start, if you have a question on this, is Advisory Circular 6165J.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, you're like, oh, I know that.
I know. He
use
didn't
that
give me
every
a
day.
chance, Dylan. It wasn't fair.
Yeah. And, that actually brings up, I'm going to go back to the landing page of this guide, but part of the thing we're going to discuss on your reinstatement check ride, or that you'll discuss with your examiner, is if you haven't been instructing actively recently, obviously the regulations change quite often. And I think there's that, for those of you that aren't in a professional aviation world, you may assume, if you're getting your commercial now, you may assume that, if a 121 pilot is constantly in the regulations. They know all the current stuff. And of course, that's not the case, because we're kind of insulated from the FAA regulations at an air carrier. And that sounds a little counterintuitive, but the reason is we rely on the air carrier's op specs. That's kind of our Bible. Like, you guys aren't cracking open Part 91 or looking at random advisory circulars. You're opening up comply before your trip. You're tapping read on all the read before flies, and you're following the AOM, the FOM, the FRM, all of the manuals, the op specs for your air carrier. That's all you're concerned about. So, doing that several years, you can kind of become disconnected from those FAA regulations that are out there. One of those is advisory circulars. I don't know. I haven't seen this at Southwest. I haven't been there that long. But I know in my military career, we never really look at advisory circulars. So, that's kind of a new thing that you need to have some knowledge of as a CFI, because that's a way that the advisory circular is a method that FAA can kind of communicate to pilots. It's sort of like the read before fly in comply, that you might be familiar with if you're a 121 carrier. That's what an AC is. So the AC 6165J, that's the advisory circular talking about certification of pilots and flight and ground instructors. So pretty common title, it makes sense that that's the title there. And then on the navigation here, we can go over to CFI recency information. And this is the methods of establishing recency experience here. And it goes through all 6. I kind of gave the short form of those. It kind of expands on it a little bit more in this AC. So the question you had of, does a 121 proficiency check, can I rehack my CFI with that? And the answer is, I guess it depends on your interpretation of number 5 here. So number 5 is within the preceding 24 calendar months, the flight instructor served as a company check pilot, chief flight instructor, or flight instructor in a Part 121 or 135 operation, or in a position involving the regular evaluation of pilots. So that's where most captains fall in, is a captain that's not an instructor at a 121 or 135 or a 91K operator would be evaluating their first officers. So I think a captain doing a PC check in a air carrier operation, I think they could probably rehack their CFI based on that. I don't think a first officer could do that. So that's my take on it. You know, there might be some exemptions.
There's always urban legends. Yeah, that's and that's why it's good to go to the source here.
Yeah, exactly. So now let's talk about reinstatement. Reinstatement is going to use the CFI Airman Certification Standards. So both of you guys, you know, we're kind of the similar era of pilots. So we did all of our ratings under the practical test standards.
PTS,
so you might have, the PTS, you might have remembered that. Well, the FAA's changed all of that, and they've moved over to the ACS, which is the Airman Certification Standards. So we've gotten rid of the PTS. And, you know, there's like two things aviators hate. They hate change, and they hate the way things are. So unfortunately, the ACS is the change, right? So they've changed it on us. And this is a relatively recent change for the CFI ACS. It was last June. But again, this is linked in the ACE guide. So we're going to tap on that, you know, kind of follow along with yours. I got it here on the screen. We're going to open up the CFI ACS. And what I've done here is the FAA hasn't done a great job of formatting this. So if you Google CFI ACS, you'll pull up this raw PDF. You can have it for free. You know, it's published by the FAA. The tasks are, it's just hard to read. So I made it easier to read, easier to navigate, and included that in the ACE guide here. But overall, the ACS is broken down. It's kind of a basic structure. And the highest level is you have areas of operation. So for example, we have an area of operation of takeoffs, landings, and go-arounds. So that's an area of operation. So we'll click on that just for grins here. So takeoffs, landings, and go-arounds. So that is labeled Area of Operation 7. So Area of Operation 7 has individual tasks. And so one of those tasks would be the short field approach and landing. So that's a specific task. So let's click on the short field approach and landing. So that takes us to the short field approach and landing task. And you can see that all the tasks are the same. They're broken down into 3 categories. We have a knowledge category, a risk management category, and a skills category. So anytime you're doing a test, you have to be tested on at least one knowledge topic, at least one risk management topic, and then you have to perform all of the skills. So for the short field approach, as our example, we have about 5 different knowledge topics to choose from. We have around, looks like 9 or 10 different risk management categories to choose from. And then on the skills, there's 13 things that you have to demonstrate to show a short field landing and approach successfully during the check ride. And so you can see for the flying tasks, the skills are kind of the meat of the whole thing. Now, reading through these skills, 13 things, that sounds like a lot for a landing. But a lot of these are, the first one, make radio calls as appropriate. That's skill 2. Okay, well, that's nothing complex, right? So if you read through these skills, a lot of it is stuff that you're doing every landing anyway. But there are things in here that are very specific that we kind of use as the grading criteria. And so one of those is, maintain manufacturer's published approach speed plus or minus 5 knots with a gust factor applied. So that's the speed that we want to maintain here. And then skill 10, touch down at a proper pitch attitude within 100 feet beyond or on a specified point. So we have a 100-foot aiming point to hit on the short field landing approach. So that's the basics of how we use the airman certification standards in the testing environment, right? So we're going to go back to the home page here for the flight instructor ACS. And each ACS has appendices. So there's an appendix 1, 2, and 3 for every ACS. And I've made it easy. If you hit the green kind of circle button that says reinstatement, it takes you directly to Appendix 1, a section in Appendix 1 that covers the reinstatement table. So here's where we get to the meat of what you have to do for a reinstatement. So this table lists out all the areas of operation, and then within the table, it tells you which tasks from that area of operation that you have to do. So if we're doing a reinstatement or a renewal, we have two big options for airplane. We can do it in airplane single engine or airplane multi-engine. They're basically the same. The areas of operation kind of change slightly. Now, that's a good point that I haven't addressed yet. If you reinstate in a multi-engine aircraft, it automatically reinstates all your other ratings that you hold for CFI. So a reinstatement of 1 reinstates everything. So that's good to know. So, if you wanted to do this, technically you could do it in a level D sim at a part 142, if you're at flight safety doing your recurrent and you wanted to do this, technically you could do it in that as like a double I. Maybe you do your instrument reinstatement. It would reinstate your CFI, your single engine privileges, your regular CFI, and your multi all at once. So that's good to know. So right now we're just going to look at, we're going to assume you guys are just going to do a day VFR CFI kind of initial reinstatement. So we're looking at column 1 here for our single engine add-on. Now I've made this pretty easy to navigate. You just tap on each of these blocks here and it will take you to the appropriate section of the ACS so you could study. So area of operation 1 has 2 asterisks. So of course, the first thing we talk about is like the most complicated on this table, but the asterisks we can read down at the bottom. A double asterisk directs the evaluator to consider the period of inactivity. Then it says the evaluator may test FOI tasks for any reinstatement. So area of operation 1 takes us to the dreaded section, the fundamentals of instruction. I'm sure this Incredible. Is what y'all study the most. I bet on overnights when you're on the treadmill, you've got the FOIs.
I usually like to talk to captains about it.
Principle of primacy is a big one for us. We're constantly discussing that one. Fundamentals of learning. There's so many. Yeah. It's hard for me to even recall. I can just see you guys in a Marriott gym, slinging the 50-pound free weight, and then just verbally going through the laws of learning. For everyone to hear. That's awesome.
Yeah, I usually do it with the single arm snatch. So every rep, I just yell at the top of my lungs.
It's easier.
And
it makes the pilot
so that way videos. It forces myself to pause at the top, execute proper form in all things.
Exactly right.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So anyway, that's the FOIs.
Wait, hold on. I got a question. So tell me how, as an evaluator, you consider the double asterisk, how you consider the period of inactivity. Tell me how it goes into that sort of decision.
No, that's a good question. So as, if I'm given a reinstatement, I've given reinstatements to a wide variety of people. So one reinstatement I gave, this guy had his instructor rating last current in the 70s. So he had left aviation altogether, was not doing anything in aviation until like 2020, 2021 or 2022, something like that. So I approached that almost like an initial CFI. Like we spent a lot of time making sure that he still knows how to teach and stuff. And luckily, his job outside of aviation, he was doing some instructing, teaching, I think as a police officer. So he was like there's instruction involved in every career field. So he was at least familiar with like how to teach people. And that's really all the FOIs are concerned about. But that's totally different than, somebody like you guys where yeah, y'all haven't had a CFI, but y'all have been involved in aviation regularly. So it's not like y'all are, getting back into the cockpit after being out of it for 20
Right.
years. Y'all just let your CFI expire. So I kind of balance it there. It's really up to our judgment. But big picture, the FAA says that we don't have to ask anything, but we can. So we just need to consider the period of inactivity. So that's area of operation 1. When we get to area of operation 2, that's the first place where we see where the FAA mandates that we cover certain things. And again, I've got links here. So area of operation 2, it links us to tasks C and K, and then one other task. So we get C2 that we have to do, and then we kind of can ask whatever we want to. So first, let's look at area of operation 2. That's our technical subject areas. So if we go to technical subject areas, we have tasks A through P. And I wish they would just number them because I can't do public math here. But that's about 16, different things in a technical subject area. So C.
And for those of you that are just listening and not watching the video here, I mean, it's kind of some of the just a smattering of these principles of flight, human factors, navigation systems, night operations, so sort of some of the technical areas that you would imagine.
Exactly.
Let's take a quick timeout from our conversation to talk about our favorite product of 2025, and that is Amigo Aeroto's T1. If you listen to our recent conversation with him, you know it has changed Max's life at the airport. No longer is he struggling to push that 2,000-pound airplane in and out of the hangar. Simply hooks up the T1 now and effortlessly moves that airplane back and forth. If you want to get more information, check out the link in the show notes for Aeroto's websites. They have a tow that'll accommodate up to 15,000 pounds. And they've got a special offer for our listeners. Use checkout code 21FIVE to get $100 off any product. Scroll down on your podcast app to find the link to Aerotow and check out all of the products they have for pilots. Okay, back to the show.
Yeah. And so the two areas that the FAA makes us cover in a reinstatement are runway incursion avoidance, because for years that's been a special emphasis item. On the old PTS, runway incursion avoidance, that was always a big deal. So that's that. The second technical subject area is endorsements and logbook entries. And then, again, back to the rest, we've got 16 other things to choose from. So we might do night operations or performance and limitations, but we have to do at least one other thing for the technical subject areas. So we'll look at the first one, which is task C, runway incursion avoidance. So really, again, with the ACS, you got to do one knowledge topic, one risk management topic, and all of the skills. Well, there's only one skill on this particular task, and it's deliver instruction on the elements and techniques for runway incursion avoidance. So that's the skill that you have to do. Now, I guarantee you, if I sit down across the table from one of you and I say, hey, tell me about runway incursion runway incursion avoidance, you could, probably without even preparing, talk to me in pilot speak about, hey, here's a time where I had a runway incursion. Here's how we could have avoided it. Here's what you could give basically a lesson on this. And during that lesson, as long as you cover at least one knowledge topic item and you talk about one of these risk management items, then that whole task is done. So it sounds a little bit harder than it actually is. I think if you break it down, it's pretty easy. Now, for those of y'all watching, you'll see here on the page, my ACE guide includes these green buttons that link to different documents that talk about runway incursion avoidance. So one of the big things that I like to stress for CFIs is make sure you're using source data to teach. So it's great that you know about runway incursion, and it's great that you have a personal anecdote that maybe demonstrates runway incursion. But what I really want you to be able to do is tie all that, correlate it with the actual source data. So I've made that very easy to find here. So you just click on one of these buttons. The AFH button, for instance, takes you to the section of the FAA Airplane Flying Handbook that talks about runway incursion avoidance. So if you're a CFI, you can assign, hey, you're going to go to page 1-12 of the AFH to read about runway incursion avoidance. And then you're going to go to page 14-31 of the PHAC to read about runway incursion avoidance. So without the use of the ACE guide, it would take a little bit more time for you to open this PDF up, close that, open another one, and find all these references.
Yeah, no kidding.
So,
well, Seth, obviously I know what the PHAC is since I'm a professional, but just for the audience, purely, could you just tell them what the PHAC is?
The new people, yeah.
Yeah, just the people
the
that
PHAC
stands
for
like I am.
The Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. So there's kind of
course.
Yeah, there's multiple FAA handbooks, and they're all in this guide, by the way. But the two big ones that you'll use are the Airplane Flying Handbook and the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. And the way to think about those two is Airplane Flying Handbook covers like how to fly the airplane on a certain maneuver. So if you want to like, how do I do a chandelle? That's going to be in the Airplane Flying Handbook. If your question is like how something in the airplane works, like, oh, I wonder how the pitot-static system works, that's going to be in the Pilot's Handbook of Aeronautical Knowledge. And so I have both of those handbooks are broken down into easy to read and navigate chapters, and they're also cross-referenced in all the ACSs that they use. So again, it makes it super easy to find.
Seth, can you post a picture of your clone or your multiple clones that you must have that are like constantly working and updating this document? For if you can't see, there's over 4,200 pages in this guide. So how do you do that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's taken years. When I first became a DPE, I quickly realized, like, okay, the applicant just said something that I think is incorrect, but I can't provide them with the reference of the correct answer fast enough. Like, I need all these documents to be in one document. So that I started building it back in 2019. And it's slowly evolved into what you see here. So it's taken a while.
But how do you stay on top of when something gets updated, and then like how does that work? And then how do you put it back in the guide? And how do you update it for everybody that paid for it and all that?
If you go to the global menu, down at the lower left-hand corner, there's a CAO button, and that's a current as of sheet. So it's a document currency sheet. Oh. And so all of the big handbooks have the FAA document number and then the publication date, and then I include the date that this currency was done. If you go to the FAA website and you will just Google FAA handbooks, it will pull up a website, and it has a similar format of all the handbooks and their most recent publication date. So if you ever wanted to check, hey, is this up to date, you could compare this to the FAA's website.
I just remember hauling all of those manuals around too.
So did I.
The access and having everything there is one thing, but it's just like not even carrying all those books too. Oh my gosh, this is incredible.
That's
all
cool.
right, so let's go back to the reinstatement. So we're down that pretty much those first two areas of operation. That pretty much covers most of the oral, and so the ground evaluation will be primarily tasks C and K and then one other. And I use what's called scenario-based evaluation. So I'll give you some sort of scenario. I'll say, hey, your son's interested in learning how to fly, and you've done some flights with him. So now you're ready for them to solo, but you need to audit their logbook to make sure they're legal to solo. So, first of all, what training should you have done before they go out and solo, and what endorsements do they need? That would be a typical scenario I'd give somebody for a reinstatement. And so in preparing that scenario, you need to get this a few weeks in advance, hopefully. So in preparing for that scenario, you would go, okay, well, I'm going to look at area of operation K. When I answer that, that's the endorsements and logbooks. And then in C, runway incursion avoidance, I would have taught, my son, here's how you're going to avoid a runway incursion avoidance when I sign you off to solo at Deer Valley, which is like the Battle of Britain.
Right.
sometimes with several active flight schools. So that'll be interesting. In the process of answering that, you're going to probably cover several different technical subject areas, because you're going to talk about how you taught him emergency procedures and slow flight, and we might have an aerodynamics discussion, and we'll talk about radio calls, and so we'll wind up talking about a lot. And that's the goal, is to make it more kind of conversational and scenario based, rather than me just sitting here and shooting off questions. And Max, you'll recognize it from your Southwest proficiency check. That last day when the check airman sits down and says, "Okay, so you're about to push back from Albuquerque, and XYZ happens." That's exactly what the FAA wants us to do. They want some sort of scenario-based format questioning. So that's what you can expect from most examiners. Okay, so that takes us through the ground. There's really just a discussion. Next, we're on to Area of Operation 3, and that's a pre-flight preparation. So Area of Operation 3, we have to do one task from 3. So if we look at Area of Operation 3, there's only 3 tasks in there. So there's pilot qualification, airworthiness requirements, and weather information. So again, we would extend this to scenario-based. And the plane that you provided, I would just say, hey, prove to me that this plane is airworthy. So you break out the logs, you show me that it has a annual complete, the 80s are complied with. If it's an experimental, the conditional inspection's done. Maybe about my 411, 413 pedostatic system is checked, all that stuff. So boom, we've done Area of Operation 3 Task B. So we've completed that.
It's kind of interesting because you can see how, if you're leading the discussion like that, you can rip through these things pretty quick and check the boxes. But the preparation of it, like some of the stuff, it's just funny when you read through it. Like, I think the exercise of renewing your CFI is actually a really good, thing to do if you haven't been in general aviation for a long time, because just things like operations under basic med. Basic med didn't exist when we were CFI. Like, there's so much stuff in here that in preparation for it, you're going to read about. And I think, if you use this to prepare for it, once you get to the actual, if you spent a little bit of time preparing for it and reading up, the checking portion of it is going to be not too daunting. I wouldn't assume. I mean, it's mostly just you kind of go through and because the requirements are actually not that stringent. It's like one task from here, one task from there. It's one of many tasks, but to prepare, you're going to have to read about all the tasks, because it could be anything, right? But it's kind of cool. I'm actually kind of getting fired up, a little bit excited.
Max is fired up. The guide has got him fired up here.
The guide honestly has me fired up because it makes it, because it's so annoying to try and search for stuff in the FAA documents. Hence the reason he created this. But this makes it so much easier. It's hard to explain if you're not watching this. So I would encourage you, if you are interested in doing this, you should stop the podcast and get the guide, and then if you're listening to it, follow along on the guide. But it makes it really much easier to prepare because it just kind of.
I mean, that was the thing for me. It was always the daunting, oh my gosh, to think about the amount of knowledge. I would say when I was a flight instructor, I was probably at my peak of aeronautical knowledge and stick and rudder flying was probably the pinnacle of where I was at. You know what I'm saying, in a way. And to think about getting back to climbing that mountain is exciting, but it can be daunting for folks. So anyways, sorry, we keep interrupting you, Seth.
I know.
No,
we're just getting too excited here, Seth. I'll have to try and keep the genie in the bottle,
Mm-hmm.
All right, so now we're on, this is the last thing that we have to do on the ground before we go out and get in the plane. And you'll notice once we get in the plane, there's not a lot that we have to do in the plane. The actual flight will probably be around an hour. So you can expect an hour on the Hobbs meter, maybe even a little less. It kind of depends on the airspace we're flying in. So far on the ground, maybe from the time you walked in the door, we shook hands, met and greet, get the application signed, go through areas of operation 1, 2, and 3. We're looking at 45 minutes, 50 minutes, maybe an hour if we were long-winded. So then we get to area of operation 4, and this is your pre-flight lesson on a maneuver to be performed in flight. So this is the task that you have to teach a maneuver that we're going to go out and perform. So this is really up to you, whatever maneuver you want to teach. I typically don't assign it in the scenario. I just say, hey, prepare a lesson on one of the maneuvers that we're going to do. So we can, later on, we'll see the maneuvers that are required. But, you know, you could choose steep turns. You could choose chandelles. You could choose the short field landing. Whatever you want to do, have a lesson prepared. Now, if your way of teaching is to stand up at a whiteboard and draw it out, perfect. If you want to build a PowerPoint presentation, perfect. If you want to use a 3D printed model and, you know, show me that, that's fine. You know, whatever you want to do, as long as you're meeting the skills required on this task. And so there's only one skill. It is to deliver instruction on a selected maneuver using a lesson plan, teaching methods, and teaching aids as appropriate that incorporates knowledge topics 1 through 3. So there's 3 knowledge topics. You know, purpose of the maneuver, elements of the maneuver and common errors, and desired outcomes, including completion standards. So it's pretty straightforward, right? You're just talking about, hey, we're going to go up and do steep turns. Give me an anecdote of why steep turns are important. Talk about how on every type rating ride you take, you have to do upset recovery and steep turns. And, you know, hey, that increases my load factor and increases my stall speed. And, you know, there's all sorts of things that you could talk about there. So talk about the maneuver, have a lesson plan, and we'll call that good. You know, the lesson is complete. So now we move on to the flying portion of the ride. And so that's gonna pick up on area of operation 5. So if we look here, we just have to do one task. Area of operation 5 is our pre-flight procedures. So if we go to the pre-flight procedures here, we have 6 different things that we can do. And I only have to evaluate you on one, but you know, by reading these, you can see that you're probably going to do all of them because one is do a pre-flight, your flight deck management, your engine starting, your taxiing, and a before takeoff check. So you're probably going to do all of those things. You don't have to teach your way through all of these things, though. You could pick one and teach through that. And I guess now's as good a time as any for the, you know, you might have some people listening that are studying for their CFI, and a common thing that I hear, and y'all might have been taught this too, is when you take your CFI check ride, they tell you, never stop talking. I want you to teach your way through the entire check ride. And people do that to me on a CFI check ride, and honestly, it drives me crazy, right? Because I want you to think about it how you want to be taught.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you were a student and your CFI talked the entire flight, that probably wouldn't be a pleasurable experience, right? That'd get quite annoying. So the way I like to teach is pick out kind of 3 learning objectives for today's flight. Kind of try it that way. So for each phase of flight, there's one specific learning objective. So sure, on pre-flight, we got to do a pre-flight, we got to do engine starting, we got to taxi, and do a before takeoff checklist. Now, if I'm teaching my daughter how to fly, I'm not going to teach through the details on each one of those every single flight. The first flight, I might say, hey, we're really going to spend some time learning how to do a pre-flight. And then we're just going to start the engine taxi. I'll help her do the checklist. We'll take off. We'll get flying. On the next flight, okay, the previous one I did pre-flight. Now we're going to go through and we're going to talk about engine starting, you know, how to do this safely. And so I'm going to use that building block approach. So that's kind of what we're shooting for here in the ACS.
I mean, so you're just basically running it like a realistic flight, because you're not going to teach everything all at once.
Well,
right?
but I've had instructors like that.
What's that?
I've had instructors like that are talking the whole time because, and to your point, Seth, they think that that's what they need to be doing. And I remember the same experience, you know, when we were at school, and they're like, talk the whole time, you know, and there is a benefit to just a little bit there, especially building block when they're just getting started. So I love that you made that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so that's our kind of, and you'll see how the ACS is laid out here. It's sort of laid out in a logical sequence. So areas of operation 1 through 5, those are all stuff we do on the ground, starting from our ground evaluation all the way to our pre-flight preparations. Then we get to area of operation 6. That's our airport and seaplane base operations. We don't have to do anything from that. There's nothing that's evaluated there. Now, I'll take a second here let's pull up area of operation 6. So that's the one that we don't have to do technically. Let me get that up here.
But
now,
you didn't link
operation,
it, so now I know how to get there.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, if you hit, so I didn't link it because it's not evaluated.
I know it's because there's none, but I'm still clicking it and nothing's happening, Seth. I don't understand. You made it so easy now that I'm just paralyzed. I'm helpless.
Yeah. But the thing I'll point out here is even if the section of the ACS isn't evaluated, if you go out and just botch it up, you could still fail for that, right? So just like you're used to on any other check ride you do for a type rating or whatnot, we basically call it oh man, I forgot the term. Basically a threat event, right? Anything you do potentially that's even the evaluator's not really interested in, but if you do it wrong, then they could issue a disapproval for that. So just because it's not said that it's going to be tested on a reinstatement, I would still say, hey, let's review this and make sure you're doing it properly, Right. But it's just not going to be on my plan of action for things that I have to evaluate you on. So next we're getting to our first flying task here is our takeoffs and landings. So that's area of operation 7. And the table here says we have to do 2 takeoffs and 2 landings. I mean, that's pretty straightforward, right? So if we go to this area of operation, again, it's area of operation 7, we pull this up, we've got 15 different things to choose from. And unless you're in a seaplane, because some of those are like your confined area, your glassy water, your rough water, we're not doing seaplane stuff, assuming that. There's only about 8 different landings, takeoffs to choose from. So we just have to do 2. And I'll give you a little bit of behind the scenes of how I construct my scenario. One of my learning objectives in these reinstatements is to make sure you, as a CFI, understand how the ACS works. So in my scenario, I'll say, okay, your scenario is you want to teach your son how to fly. So that's going to be the ground portion of like, how would you go about doing that? For the flying portion, I'm going to say, I want you to use the ACS and develop a plan of action for us to go and complete the required maneuvers. So it's kind of a choose your own adventure. And when I get to the check ride, if you've done it successfully, you've found that, hey, there's this reinstatement page and you've got all of the tasks picked out. So you've got them all picked out. And you said, hey, I've used the ACS. I found Appendix 1. Here's the 2 landings and takeoffs I want to do. Here's the ground reference and performance maneuver I want to do. Here's the 2 get what I'm saying? So instead of spoon feeding you, I've evaluated just right there in your preparation for the check ride. I've evaluated your knowledge of being able to use the regulations. So, hey, you've made my job easier and you learned something out of it. So I typically don't assign landing tasks. I just let you choose that.
Let's take a quick break to tell you about a friend of the show, Timothy P. Pope. Tim is a certified financial planner who specializes in helping professional pilots chart a smarter financial course. Whether you're focused on retirement, investment management, or strategic tax planning, Tim brings the tools and insight to help you make the most of your career and beyond. He's also the host of the Pilot's Portfolio podcast, where he breaks down real-world financial strategies designed specifically for pilots. Timothy P. Pope, helping professional pilots make the most out of life.
All right, so now we're through the landings there. That is area of operation 7. Fundamentals of flight, we don't have to evaluate any of those. We don't have to do those. So there's none required there. Then we're on to Area of Operation 9. And in Area of Operation 9, we have to do 1 ground reference and 1 performance maneuver. So we have several to choose from here. So if we look at Area of Operation 9, we've got steep turns, steep spirals, chandelle, lazy eights, ground reference maneuvers, and eights on pylons. So those are the 6 maneuvers we can choose from. You can pick any combination, but it has to be 2 performance and 2 ground reference. The only ground reference ones are the ground reference maneuvers. There's 3 of those: the rectangular course, the S turns, or the turns around a point.
No, wait, you
And
only
then
have to
there's
do
the
one
eights
ref and one ground ref and 1 performance, right?
Correct.
Okay, I thought you said 2 of
So-
each. Got it.
No, well, let me make sure here.
No,
think
I
it's
checked.
just 1 of
I
each. Yeah,
consulted the appendix in the ACS before I spoke.
There you go. So you could choose steep turns, and remember, you've already taught me one of these maneuvers, hopefully, in your ground course. You know, your ground lesson. Hey, I taught you steep turns. We're going to apply the lesson that I taught on the ground. Let's apply that and do steep turns. So you're going to show me steep turns. And then I'll probably at that time say, okay, let's level off here. And because now we're kind of doing our high work. We're talking about energy management a little bit, but that's part of being a good CFI. You don't want to be up and down, especially if you're crazy enough to try to do this in an underpowered 150 in the middle of July in
who would do
Phoenix.
that?
Let's just say, for an example,
No one would do that.
you know, you don't want to climb more than you have to. So we're going to climb up to the top of the practice area. We're going to do a performance maneuver, and then we're not going to go do our ground reference yet, because there's other stuff that we need to do at altitude in other areas of operation. So the next area of operation, which is 10, is slow flight stalls and spins. So area of operation 10, we have to do 2 tasks. So we've got several different slow flight and stalls that we can choose from. We just have to do 2. But obviously we want to do those at a safe altitude. So if you scroll through on the guide, on some of these areas of operation, actually, let's pause here for a second. At the top of each, you'll see the green circle that'll take you back to the area of operation you need to do. But if you go back to your global menu, you can go to the private pilot ACS. So here's where occasionally, on all of these, what I'll do is I'll have you use the private pilot ACS for some of the tasks that we're doing, because I'm reinstating you to be able to teach to the private pilot or commercial pilot standards. So I want you to not only be able to use the CFI ACS, but also be able to do the private pilot ACS. So if you were doing the scenario appropriately of like, hey, I'm teaching my son how to fly, you would pull up the private pilot ACS and you would go to the slow flight and stalls section, and you could see, okay, what is my son going to have to perform on his check ride? To what standard are they going to have to do slow flight and stalls? So you can go to the private pilot ACS and kind of incorporate that. But I haven't mentioned that yet, but that's something you would want to do in your studying, is like see what these other ratings require, not just the CFI, if that makes sense. So you'll see we're in the slow flight section. If you click on the info tab on the private pilot, it'll take you to your another appendix that talks about kind of safety things that you need to consider. And that's also in the CFI ACS. So let's take a look at that at the CFI. You'll see there's a little caution flag here on Appendix 2, which is safety of flight. So looking at our safety of flight, it'll give us some single engine considerations in Appendix 2, and then Appendix 3, which is your operational requirements and limits. It will talk about some of the things like our power off stall. So let's say we wanted to do power off stalls. It gives us some considerations there. Now let's say you want to choose accelerated stalls. It gives us some more specific detail about accelerated stalls. And if we go back to that task of accelerated stalls and we get down into the skills area, this is where you really want to pay attention, because the altitude if you choose accelerated stalls, the task has to be completed no lower than 3,000 feet. So especially in this area of operation 10, you want to be very careful and pay attention to the altitudes that it mandates. Because if you get ahead of yourself and say, okay, we did steep turns, let's say we're at 2,000 feet AGL. You do steep turns, you're like, okay, Seth, I want you to demonstrate an accelerated stall for me. And I'll look at you and be like, at this altitude? And you're like, yeah, go for it. Okay. Well, technically I would have to issue a disapproval there because you asked me to do a maneuver below the mandated altitude in the book. So that's an example of pay attention to those skills, make sure you've got a good plan of action. So a way that we can kind of be efficient here is, remember, we need to do one performance maneuver and then we have to do 2 of these maneuvers here. Well, one of the performance maneuvers we have to choose from, if we go back here, is a chandelle. And a chandelle is an energy gaining maneuver. So something that you might choose to do is, let's go up to 2,000 feet and do slow flight. So that's one of our slow flight maneuvers done. Recover from slow flight and do a chandelle. So that's now our performance maneuver, and we've now increased our altitude. So we've done that climb. And then after that chandelle's over, we verify that we're above 3,000 feet. We can do an accelerated stall. Okay, so that's stall number 2. So that's done. And then we're higher up in the area where we might be able to simulate some sort of emergency. And that emergency is what's going to drive us down to a simulated off-field landing. Now we're low in the area and we can do our ground reference maneuvers. So that's maybe the kind of level of thinking I want you to do as an instructor, of like, how are you going to construct this for us to be most efficient? So
and I have a question, Seth. So during the check ride with all these maneuvers, are you basically, you're flying and teaching the entire time? There's never a point where you as the examiner are flying and the applicant is teaching you to do something, is there?
That's a good question. No, there'll be times where I'm flying. Yeah, I'm going to choose, and that's something I might leave up to you. I try to be flexible. So if I see the opportunity, I may ask to fly, and I will intentionally do something wrong. And the goal isn't to have you snatch the controls from me. The goal is for you to provide appropriate instruction, and then I'll respond to that instruction. And, I'm just evaluating your ability to teach there. So, yeah, I will do some of the flying in these check rides.
But that's not necessarily in your plan. You're not going to be like, okay, I'm going to fly this one, you're going to fly this. You just plan on teaching and flying, and then if you find an opportunity you want to fly as the examiner, then you'll say, hey, how about I try this stall or whatever.
Yeah, I will. Okay. I will generally, that's kind of an as appropriate, because these things are dynamic. And so if I see an opportunity, it is in my plan to at least do some flying, because I want to give you the opportunity to actually teach. And then I also want to make sure that you have the situational awareness to realize that I'm messing something up, right? That's a big part of being an instructor. So that's kind of a basic plan of action where we've done our one performance maneuver, our one ground reference maneuver, our 2 stall slow flight maneuvers. And now we're almost done. We have 2 more tasks that we have to do. We have area of operation 12, which is emergency operations. Remember, we already worked that into our plan because we were up in the area, and in order to get down, instead of just descending, I failed your engine, or you failed my engine. And the way I might present this in the check ride is to say, hey, Dylan, simulate for me how you would simulate an in-flight emergency. Just go ahead and show me how you would show that to a student. And this is kind of where the art comes in. You could just the easiest thing is reach over, pull the throttle out, and say, "Oh no, your engine died." I'm like, "Well, I've never seen that one before." Okay, well, what do we do? Best glide, yeah. Get a little creative here. Maybe use some of your real world experience, dumb it down for the plane that we're flying in, and give me that emergency. Maybe say, hey, you go to add power and the throttle just moves freely. So the throttle has become disconnected from the carburetor, or whatever mechanism you're using to control fuel flow. So now you have an unresponsive throttle. What do you do? And so you're giving your student the opportunity to kind of think outside of the checklist, because I doubt that a 172 has a checklist for unresponsive throttle. And, one of the things that we want to teach everybody that we're instructing is good aeronautical decision making. And that, a big part of that, and this from your professional flying, is there's not a checklist for everything. And we need to prepare our pilots to be able to think on their feet for kind of a complex emergency. So give me something like that. Eventually what it's going to work into is an engine failure, and we're going to go to best glide, and we're going to use that to get down to the bottom of our area and do some sort of simulated kind of emergency landing out in the desert somewhere, for instance. And then we'll do a go around, obviously, before we land. And we're in the low part of the area, so we can start our ground reference maneuver. So that's we only have to do one emergency. And then we're finally at the last task, and this is our post-flight procedures. We have to do one of really one thing, is the after landing parking and securing. And there's 5 skills associated with that. There's nothing complex. Can you taxi the airplane back to the ramp without crashing it, causing a runway incursion, wrecking the engine, and tie it down? It's the bar is pretty low here. So the way I might complicate it a little bit is say, okay, let's say on post-flight, we noticed that we had a bird strike, and this is a club aircraft. How would you handle that? Well, on post-flight of anywhere, you do your walk around and you notice weird stuff stuck to your tires in Vegas. What do? You get the coffee stirrers. It's in the manual. So
That's right.
So
it's in the appendix.
Clever.
It was in the ACE guide. There was a little link in there, I believe. I found that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's pretty straightforward. From there, we're going to go inside and we're going to have a debrief, and we're going to talk about good, bad, and ugly. Hopefully, a lot of the things I can cover with the debrief, because the ACS, this is a check ride, sure. But just like for your PC or your type rating, perfection isn't the standard here. The standard is, do I feel comfortable signing you off that you're going to be able to go out and safely instruct people and keep them safe? Because that's ultimately your job as an instructor, is to keep your students safe while you're flying. And as long as you demonstrated that you can keep your pilot safe and you met all of the areas of operation properly, then I'm going to sign off your ticket and you'll get reinstated on all of the instructor certificates that you hold. So that's that. That's how the reinstatement ride would go.
That was really well done, Seth. Just like really. But I think it is a lot. But I think you did it. You really presented it in a way that sounds like something that you can achieve, without having to go fly, 50 hours in a piston airplane to be ready to do, everything. You can kind of focus on what's important.
Yeah, I think you could really minimize the time spent preparing. Like if you have to rent an airplane and stuff to prepare for this, like I really think you could minimize that quite a bit by, providing that you put on the time on the ground, right? Learning what you need to do. And then literally, even if you have the flight sim set up, like, a lot of the teaching is not necessarily about the teaching is separate from the skills of actually executing the maneuver. So you could practice that stuff, in your living room. And then once you get all that work done, put it all together in the airplane for a couple flights of preparing. But, yeah, I don't know. That was really good. I have a lot better of understanding of like what when you do. So you heard Seth referencing as a joke, doing this check ride, reinstatement check ride in July in Phoenix. So we're smart enough to have basically committed to doing exactly that. So we have a date in July. Seth's going to come out, and Dylan and I are going to do the what we just discussed and attempt to reinstate our CFIs. Because if we can do it, then you know that you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm going to do it in my airplane in the Cub, and Dylan's going to do it in what is it, a 150 or 152?
It's a 150 Lima model. So we do have a couple of extra. Yeah. So you look forward to learning all about that, Seth. The document review is going to be very, very thorough. I think you're going to enjoy that portion. But yeah, I think even if you just listen to this and maybe the CFI renewal isn't in your future, but maybe you're just a student and you're listening to learn a little bit more about what it takes to be a good flight instructor. Seth went through very thoroughly and talked about like a plan of action and efficiency and creating a lesson plan that's going to be valuable. When you hear Max and I talk all the time and give advice to folks, when we say, hey, listen, if you can do it, flight instructing is a really good thing to do right after you get out of flight school. It's not for everybody, but if you can, the amount of skills that you're gonna build are extremely valuable and will serve you in your career. And I think Seth did a good job of kind of demonstrating a lot of the mental work that goes into being an efficient instructor. And yes, maybe it's not the manipulation of the airplane, which you've kind of spent some time doing, but it's a lot of that mental work of being in charge, calling the shots, and thinking sort of a few steps ahead to become efficient. Those are some of, I think, the biggest skills that you can get out of being a CFI, is sort of kind of having that big picture in your mind. So hopefully you kind of got a little idea of what that's like and why that's a really important skill that's going to serve you for the rest of your career.
Yeah, being a CFI is definitely a good thing. And the other thing, too, if you're looking at renewing it, and, even if somebody waved their magic wand and said, oh, you have your CFI back, dude, there's no way you're in a real position to teach anything without going through this on your own, which the preparation requires you to do, because everything has changed. The ACS and the areas of operate, all of this stuff is new. So it's not, the reinstatement is certainly a learning process. It's going to be for me and for you. And I've been involved in general aviation for a while too. And so I can't say I consult the PHAC often anymore, but I look forward to.
You've just uploaded it into your brain, Max.
Yeah,
so there's no need. Yeah, it's your own PHAC.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So it'll be pretty cool.
Let me get you out on a couple quick questions, Seth. For folks that do a reinstatement, I mean, you kind of, obviously the guide that you've created is a big help. But what are a couple common pitfalls that folks run into, or maybe mistakes that are made? That a couple tips you could maybe give folks.
I'd say not using the outside resources that are available to folks right now. So if you're a member of AOPA, for instance, there's which I encourage if you're involved in general aviation. AOPA, I think, is a great organization. It's the closest thing we have to like a union for GA flying. But their Air Safety Institute has some really good computer-based training tools that you could take if you're getting back into GA flying. And one of them is like a rusty pilot's course. So yeah, you might be an airline guy with 30,000 hours, but you haven't touched a piston in 30 years. So you're a rusty pilot when it comes to flying a piston. So going out and taking that rusty pilot's course would be a really good thing for you to do. That's also counts for wings credit. We touched on wings earlier. We didn't really talk in detail about it. I'm a wings fast team representative for the FAA. Is one of my volunteer things that I do. So one of the things that the wings program also has are these safety seminars. And so you can go to faasafety.gov and it's a terrible website, but you can struggle through it enough to find the seminar locations. And most places will have live seminars kind of on a monthly basis. So that's a great place, if you are an airline or corporate guy that is wanting to get back into GA but doesn't know where to start. The Wings program is actually a good place to start there. Another resource out there for getting back into GA, kind of giving back to the community, would be Civil Air Patrol. And I think y'all have talked about that before, maybe. But, getting involved in CAP, a little more involved than getting involved in the Wings program, but that's another tool out there. So going out, doing that self-education, there's plenty of like YouTube stuff. You can check out my YouTube channel. There's a lot of other free, aviation YouTube channels that you can you can kind of self-study almost all of this stuff, even if you don't have access to a flight school that's going to give you a good ground school. And the other pitfall is be careful on showing up to a flight school and expecting to get a good flight review or training, because what I've noticed is there's a little bit of a halo effect that happens when you, a 8,000 hour ATP 737 driver, show up and this young 800 hour CFI is going to give you a flight review. They're assuming a lot of things. They think that you are at the pinnacle of aviation, and their measly little skills don't have anything to offer you. And so what I've noticed personally is when I went to go get checked out in a 172, my checkout was terrible, because the kid that's flying with me, yeah, I've got way more flight experience than he does, but I have 0 time in this airplane. And they're not giving me a good flight review or kind of checkout in this plane because they're making a lot of assumptions. So I have to kind of like, hey, I really want to see X, Y, or Z to feel more comfortable. So just be prepared to kind of ask for that training. Don't expect to just get it, because you could go out and get a really quick and probably not appropriate level of training in a training aircraft. And I like to tell my military folks, Cessna 150 will kill you just as fast as a C-130. You'll just die at a slower airspeed probably. So it's not that it's easier, necessarily. It's like a different thing of complex that you need training for. So make sure you're getting a good flight review and not just leaning on those 20,000 hours of airline experience and expect to be able to fly 172.
Very well said.
All right, Dylan. Unless you have anything else for Seth, we will send people. So Seth has a website. It's VSL Aviation. And you can find the ACE guide here and his links to his YouTube videos and other stuff. And Seth has agreed to give the 21.5 listeners a 10% discount on the ACE guide. It retails for $70. Having used it, it's worth every penny. I can attest to that, especially if you're preparing to reinstate your CFI, but even otherwise, just to have just stuff I've never even seen before, legal interpretations of how, two people can log PIC and just all kinds of stuff that I've used it for to learn. So use the code at his website when you buy it, 21.521FIVE for that discount, and check it out. Stay tuned. See if Dylan and I can pass on our first attempt.
Max, do you think we could raffle off if you reinstate your CFI? Could we raise money for charity, maybe with a ground session with you or something, some type of?
No,
I don't know.
I don't think anybody wants me to be teaching them anything. Maybe we do something more fun. The Carbon Cup, Dylan, was not developed like the 172 for flight training per se. It was developed to do more fun things that we can maybe take advantage of. I don't know. I mean, whatever you're into, I guess. If you want to learn, if you want me to teach you how to do slow flight, go for it. It'll be very slow. I can guarantee you that. That's about it.
No, I like where Dylan's going though, because that opens up this can of worms of compensation and illegal charter. And
there you go.
So I think you opened up a very good topic that we'll probably discuss on your reinstatement.
There we go.
Yeah, perhaps a little 91.213 paragraph D, and
I'm already searching the ACE guide for the.
It's going to get
correct.
This is going to get nasty.
Document reference.
I can't wait.
Seth, we will check out the website. We'll have the link in the show notes. It's VictorSierraLima.aero. You also have an online presence with YouTube, social media, and even a podcast.
Yes.
So he's a man of many talents.
Seth has more followers than us. Seth, would you mind plugging us on your social media? Because that's really what
are we doing here?
We'd like to develop a symbiotic relationship here. So if you wouldn't mind, get the word out.
Yeah, absolutely. I've actually plugged y'all's show a few times on my show, and now I've got a pretty active Discord channel where I send people your way, because your show's great for the people looking forward to get into professional aviation. Y'all bridge the gap there really well, so I love the show.
We appreciate it, man. Well, thank you very much for the time and coming on the show, and we'll look forward to seeing you in July.
All right. I can't say that I look forward to it, but yeah, it'll be an experience.
Now, do you have any objections to doing the ground portion in a swimming pool or something like that early in the morning to kind of stay cool? Is that what?
Yeah, what you don't realize is the strategy here is that the only time I'm available that day is about 3 p.m. to do this check ride.
Oh man!
Because I figure it'd be pretty brief, and we'll just get up and get done with it once if it's 115
also,
degrees.
I don't know if you know, in Max's Carbon Cup, he requires a full Nomex flight suit to be worn at all times.
Yeah, perfect.
I may have to replace a couple cylinders after because of the inability to keep it cool
the
during the
problem
Chandelle.
is,
But
the problem is if I die of heat exhaustion after the application is signed, there's no way for me to complete it and issue the reinstatement. So
it'll put us in a real. That's why we'll have to get a legal interpretation on that.
Real bind here. We're gonna have to plan that out. All right, Seth. Well, as always, great talking to you. All your information will be in the show notes for folks to be able to get a hold of you. Can't recommend the guide enough. I think it's gonna be a great resource for. Really anyone. It's not just for folks that are trying to renew their CFIs. This is private pilot through instructor. And now, Max, it's time for us to go learn what the ACS means.
That's it. Hey, I have one question. This guide is essentially it's a PDF. Where do you keep the guide, Dylan? Like on your computer, on your iPad? Do you save it to books?
You can
like, where do you?
Yeah, I mean, I believe, and Seth, you can even put it in ForeFlight, right?
That's where I have mine. It's in the docs in ForeFlight.
Yeah.
It's a PDF, so it's like device independent, and each download comes with 5 downloads, and it's first of all it's lifetime updates. So if you just have to buy it once, you don't have to buy it every year. So you'll get notified through the account. You buy it through Shopify. And so whenever there's an update, you'll get an email saying, hey, there's an update available. You download that. You can download it to all your personal devices. So I have it on my Android phone, my Apple, iPad, and then my desktop computer. So it's nice that it's device independent like that.
Cool.
Magnificent.
All right, Seth. Well, thanks again, man. We appreciate you coming on the show, and look forward to seeing you in a couple months.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. We'll see you next time.
The statements made in this show are our own opinions and do not reflect, nor were they under any direction from any of our employers.